Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
And they're off.
Brought to you by Go Racing. Plan your day at the races at goracing.ie.
Yeah, you're very welcome along to a very special Friday Night Racing. Our guest this week is none other than the great Jim Bolger, who's with us in studio for the next while. If you've got any comments, feel free to drop them into us on the Twitter feed, on the YouTube stream, or wherever it is that you're watching this. But Jim, you're very, very welcome. Thanks very much for making the time to come into us today.
Thank you, Ger. Thanks for having me.
I want to start by commiserating. You're wearing the Wexford colours. I spent a fortnight in Wexford in the build-up to the game, and it possessed every conversation. The flags were out. Everybody was so excited about the semi-final, and they were so close to getting over the line.
Yeah, we take our hurling very seriously down there. Yeah, they put up a good show. I felt sorry for the boys because they worked hard all year, and to get so close and just fall at the last wasn't so nice.
No, and it looked like when the sending off happened and the goal went in after that, okay, they're actually going to take advantage of the extra man the way so few teams managed to do. So I guess that makes the defeat all the bit harder the way it happened.
Yes, well, I think well, in my eyes anyway, the turning point was Sean Murphy going off injured. He was doing a brilliant job there around the half-back line.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they picked up most of the possessions from there.
It's funny how sport hinges on such small margins. I'm starting by talking about hurling because it's that time of year again where your Hurling for Cancer match happens, which has become a staple of the GAA calendar as well as the racing calendar.
Yes, we started it about 8 years ago, and I was asked by the late Professor Fitzpatrick if I could manage to raise some money for cancer research. And at the same time, Davy Russell was very anxious to play my staff with his jockeys, which never really came off because we got the idea then that we could broaden that out a little bit and put on a proper match. Yeah,
Davy obviously felt that the jockeys were going to take your staff.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It's quite competitive.
He would have been very confident, but we were lying in wait.
Okay, so that was the genesis of the idea, and then you broadened it out, but I think it's the support that it's got from the hurling community generally has kind of turned it into this massive event.
Yeah, we're getting it from everywhere. I think the children have a lot to do with it now because they can meet all the ex-players and get photographs with them and get their autographs and talk to them and what have you. The players are very good. They spend about an hour after the game and they meet them all. So several parents have told me that their children are driving them mad. You know, they have to be there on the 13th of August and no excuse will be tolerated.
It makes sense because when you look at the list of players that you've got, I'm not going to read them all, but maybe I will. So it's Ollie Canning, Joe Canning, Tommy Walsh, JJ Delaney, Charlie Carter, Eddie Brennan, John Milan, Pádraig Mahoney, Jamie Barron, Ursula Jacob, Anya Ling, Aisling Thompson, Lee Chin, Conor McDonald. Obviously you would prefer if the lads weren't available, but unfortunately they are. Shane Dowling's coming, Chris Crummy, Cian Boland, Niall Quinn, Stephen Hunt, Jamie Codd, Davy Russell, Michael Dignan, Johnny Doyle, the two Johnnies, Shane Foley and Mark Enright. That's not bad.
No, and just in case anybody is worried about the golden oldies, we'll have the oxygen on hand for those.
And maybe a defibrillator just in case you need it.
Of course.
Look, when you organise something like this, you're always worried. It's like, you throw a party, you're never sure if anybody's going to show up. But over the years, it's just grown and grown. Yeah,
we were worried year one. I said to Jackie, my wife, as we drove into Newbridge, I wonder will there be anybody here? And we got 1,500. And it's gone up then each year. And last year we had 5,500. So we're hoping to at least equal that this year.
Yeah,
but so we've always had sunshine, so we're just hoping that the weather will hold up.
Tuesday the 13th of August in St Conleth's Park in Newbridge. Throw-in is at 6, but the gates open at 4:30, and you recommend people get there early enough.
Get there early, yeah. And we have the Garda band; they'll keep them amused, yeah.
Yeah. So look, it's a really great thing, and it's obviously good to give back. So congratulations to everybody involved in putting it together. And these things don't just happen. There is like a backroom team who managed to make everything, to coordinate calendars to make sure that everybody's going to come. So I'm sure there's people in the background who are making this happen too.
Yeah, well, my secretary, Mary Claire, she puts a lot of effort into it. My daughter, Una Manning, and Barbara White from Horse Racing Ireland, and many more.
Yeah,
but they do most of the work.
And it has been quite...
James Dowling, former All-Ireland under-21 captain, he organises most of the players.
It's been pretty competitive. The games are high-scoring and close.
Oh yeah, well, we always think that it's going to be a bit of fun until the throw-in, and then it gets competitive. Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the names there, you can see that they'll take it seriously.
Yeah, well, this year now, Damien Fitzhenry got Brendan Cummins for me, and I was thinking that Damien can play one half and Brendan Cummins the other half, but as soon as that happened, Davy Russell, I see, has swiped Brendan Cummins.
Okay.
So, it's going to be very hard to get them past him.
Fair enough.
Really hard to get them past Damien.
Yeah, so, I know, exactly. Yeah. One of the greatest goalkeepers of all time.
And then they both have good cover in front of them. JJ Delaney's in front of Brendan Cummins, and Jackie Tyrrell in front of Damien Fitzhenry. So the standard will be very high.
Yeah.
And like last year, I felt that the standard was higher than you would get in a county final in any of the hurling counties.
Well, they're absolute superstars of the game, and,
yes.
and from the jockeys, they're competitive about everything. These hurlers are competitive about everything. That's what made them great for so long. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be great.
I hope you'll be able to get down and bring a busload with you.
Definitely. Jim, I wanted to talk to you about your career generally. We may start with something that I was unaware of. I didn't realise your background is actually show jumping before you get into training. Yeah,
well, I did a little bit, but my career in comparison to hurling for cancer is a bit dull. But now that you want to go there anyway, I'll do the best I can. Yeah, I show jumped for a while, maybe 2 or 3 years before I went training.
So when you were a kid, what did you want to do?
I wanted to work full-time with horses, but I wasn't sure whether it would be show jumping or racing.
Okay, and what gave you that? Like, what was, when, do you remember the first time?
I grew up on a farm in Wexford.
Right.
And it was, well, for us anyway, it was pre the tractor days.
Right.
And we used to ride the working horses.
Okay.
So I've always been around horses.
What type of farm was it?
We had 90 acres, and it was mixed farming.
Okay, so
in Oilgate in Wexford.
Okay, so some dry stock, some cattle, and
well, no, they weren't very dry. We all had to milk by hand.
Right.
So I suppose at that time we milked about 25 cows, and it grew from there. Then after the milking machine came in. Okay, so in my time there wasn't any milking machine.
It's not an obvious career for a kid growing up in Oilgate to decide that I want to become a trainer. How does that journey happen? When do you kind of start thinking?
Well, as I said earlier, I always wanted to work full time with horses, but I wasn't sure how I could make it stack up.
Right.
And
did people kind of say, look, don't be silly, you're a farmer
I didn't
here.
Talk about it.
Right, it's a secret.
So,
okay.
Yeah. I've never talked very much about what I intended doing.
Yeah.
And I know that it was generally believed that I was a bit mad when I decided to have a go.
So when you started out at show jumping, you thought that would be your
that was fine. The show jumping went well. I was pretty good at the dealing.
Right.
So I was able to cover all the X's and maybe have a little over.
Okay.
And then I was very fortunate with the very last show jumper I had. He was quite good, and I got a good price for him.
So
that was my last one.
Okay.
And he bought some race horses for me then.
Okay. With show jumpers, were you just buying and selling them? Were you
actually? Yeah, buying.
Were you competing as a show jumper?
I did. I competed badly. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. That must have been cool.
Yeah, it was good fun. Yeah, especially any day that managed to have a win.
Right. So and there were some wins along the way.
A few, yeah, very modest.
But at some point, you realised that this wasn't going to be a lifetime career.
Well, I had already started off training when I had my last show jumper.
Okay.
And
that's a big deal, like to decide I'm going to train a horse now. Especially when you're not from a horsey family where, like, you just pick it up naturally, kind of by osmosis. You see it happening all the time.
Yeah, well, show jumpers have to have a certain amount of fitness and they have to ride well.
Yeah.
And like that's the basis for the racehorse as well. So it was a question then of finding out if I could find out if they were any good or not. And I got lucky, I suppose. The first horse that I owned, I didn't have a license at the time myself, so I gave it to the late Phil Canty on the Curragh, and he won with her on her second start.
Right.
And she got a fracture then sometime after that, and I nursed her through it, and then I started training myself the following year.
Okay.
And I would have had about 7 or 8 horses which we own ourselves.
Okay, so that was the way you started. It wasn't from anybody else.
I had one outside horse.
Okay.
So that was the reason I had to take out a licence. Otherwise I could have worked on what's known as a permit, where you can train your own horses.
Okay.
But the outside horse was quite good. He won a race up the Curragh. In actual fact, my 3rd or 4th runner was a winner, and I had a winner at Clonmel on the same day.
Wow.
So
who trusted you at the start with a horse when you'd know?
A friend of a friend.
Okay, so
who was a bit naive.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good friends.
Yes. So that worked out very well, and his horse won, and we got him a good price for it. He was sold to California,
right.
And he did quite well out there.
So obviously you've had the experience of winning with show jumping, but presumably that day when you've 2 winners as a trainer, like the drug is then fully in your system, and that's you hooked for life. You want to be a trainer.
Well, I had wanted to be a trainer before that, but I had to make it stack up as well. Like I had 2 children at that stage and a wife to support.
Yeah.
And with the 2 winners on the same day, that got me some publicity. So the following year then, we had 18 horses with a few outside owners, plus the horses we own ourselves.
Okay.
And we had 22 winners.
Wow, okay, so in year 2.
And the other 2 were the previous year.
Yeah.
Well, I had 4 in the first year.
Okay.
Yeah. But the more memorable one was the away double, the winner at the Curragh and Clonmel on the same day. So the following year then, as I said, we had 18 horses and we won 22 races. And Sir Hugh Nugent, who was a very successful trainer in Lahunda Park in Clonsilla, it's a housing estate now, he came to me after I had 22 winners with 18 horses, and he said that it was the best strike rate horses to winners in the country, and would I train his, because he said he was tired and he was giving up.
Right.
So he leased me his stables, which was
in Clonsilla.
In Clonsilla, yeah.
Right.
And there were about 60 stables there, and it didn't take us very long to fill them.
Okay, so that's a huge...
And, about 12 of those horses belonged to him and his family.
So that's a quantum leap forward then.
Yeah, well, that year then, I think we had 32 winners, and the following year then we had 42, so we were away at that stage.
No, and that's it. It's kind of, it's a self-sustaining business. Just to go back one bit, because I think this has always been very interesting anytime I've had the chance to talk to you, is that you were never just a trainer, you were always somebody who was breeding and owning horses as well at the same time. You wanted to understand how the whole business worked and make sure that...
Well, I had this grandiose idea that we could own all the horses ourselves. Also, I didn't think for one moment that people would want to give me horses to train for them. But when the winners came along then, people came to me. But we still always own about half the horses ourselves, and at this stage it's about 80-20.
You say it's a grandiose idea, but it's really a great idea, right? If you can pull it off.
Well, it's high risk, and I'm the only person in the world who's doing it on that scale. So if it was a very sensible thing to be doing, other people would be doing it.
Well, sometimes the mad ideas are the best ones.
I've had great luck down the years, so we've managed to hang in there.
Yeah, and so if somebody was starting out now, would you recommend that they try and do that for as long as they can, or as much as they can?
Well, it's not something I can recommend to anybody. But lots of young people ask me about, I'm thinking of being a trainer, what do I need? And I tell them that they need 5 million quid in their back pockets, and they also need to know something about it, and then be prepared to lose it all. And if it works, well and good. If it doesn't, well, they have to have plan B.
Right.
I had a plan B as well, but I never had to use it.
You were an accountant, is that what plan B was?
Yeah, but I wasn't going back inside 4 walls again.
Okay, right. What was plan B?
I was going to talk to a few builders.
Right.
Even though I'm not very big, I was able-bodied.
Right, okay.
So I knew that, I always felt I'd be able to put the bread on the table anyway.
Yeah. And I presume that came from a work ethic that you must have had as a kid.
Yeah, well, I wasn't afraid of work.
Yeah.
And
so that's where your confidence comes from.
Unlike lots of people nowadays, I'm able to drive a shovel. So I didn't have any great fear about it. I said, if it works, well and good. If it doesn't, I have plan B.
And so you must have known fairly soon, like, when you get the stables in Clonsilla, you know it's working. At that point,
yeah.
This is it now, you're in it.
Yes, well, I knew I was up and running then. And I also knew at that time, and even if I didn't know, I was very friendly with Mick O'Toole from the outset, the late Mick O'Toole, who trained on the Curragh very successfully. And he assured me that nobody in this game ever goes broke. So I believed him, and that was quite the case for a long number of years. But sadly, in the last 10 years or so, I'm not saying anybody went broke, but some trainers had to give it up.
Yeah, totally. There was during the bust, it was clear that some trainers were really struggling. So, it was definitely hard there for a long period of time. Hopefully, it's at a more sustainable level now.
Yeah, well, it was the same in Britain. Quite a few trainers over there gave it up.
Jim, again, we talk about this on the show a good bit. It's a sport, but it's a business.
Yeah, it's a professional sport. I feel a bit guilty going to hurling matches because if I have any success, I get well paid for it. But the boys at hurling, they get hardship, but then they have the self-satisfaction from it.
Because it's a professional sport and because it is a business, that you need to be a great sports person, but you also need to be a really good businessman as well at the same time.
Yeah, it's very important to manage the business properly, yeah.
And what do you consider your business? Is your business the whole thing, it's finding a good bloodline, understanding what that bloodline's traits are, and then nursing those horses to the point where you can place them in the right races? It's a confectionery of different things.
Yeah, basically what I did in the early days, I went to the yearling sales and I bought fillies. And there was a little bit of downside to that. I was fairly successful with the fillies. Then he became known as a filly trainer, so nobody's going to give you colts. So anyway, I would go to the sales, buy fillies, and hope to win races with them, and I always made sure they'd have reasonable pedigrees, so I would then keep those for breeding unless I was offered a price that was outside my comfort zone for keeping them. And then that's how the breeding started then, and that was it took a while to build up, but it did build up properly. We've managed to breed a few European champion 2-year-olds.
When you say took a while, what, like 5 years, 10 years?
Probably over 10, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've no doubts along the way as that's happening that this process is a bit slower than I thought it was going to be, or, No,
I never knew. I never felt that it would be very quick.
Right.
But in the meantime, I was having plenty of winners, so I was able to keep the show on the road anyway.
These aren't the same skills, right? These are all different skills that most of the rest of the industry, you're a breeder, you're a trainer. Like, how do you get good at breeding? How do you get good at training at the same time?
Well, any trainer would be fairly familiar with pedigrees, and he would have a very good idea of what was needed to win good races on the track, and you just take it from there then. Obviously, when you have your fillies, and they're subsequently retired, they become mares, and then you have to mate them wisely. I didn't always do that, but I got lucky some years back and hit on Galileo in the early days.
Before Galileo went crazy?
Before Galileo was Galileo.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's your business model as well. I think you've talked before about buying fillies. You bought fillies because they were cheaper and you could afford more of them.
Yes, and I bought Galileo fillies when they weren't very expensive.
Right.
But, nowadays, you couldn't expect to buy a Galileo filly now for much under $1 million, whereas that time I was able to buy them for less than 100,000.
Did you know? I mean, obviously you didn't know, but like you picked them because you thought they were going to be successful. Did you have an idea that that's what Galileo and the progeny would end up becoming?
Well, I saw Galileo as a racehorse, and I used to talk to Michael Kinane about him, and he was very, very sweet on him, both as a racehorse and as a prospective sire.
Right.
So I couldn't wait for him to go to stud.
Okay.
And when he did, then
you were first in queue.
I sent a lot of mares to him.
Right, early on before.
And he got off to a fairly slow start. I think he started off at about 50,000, and then when he didn't get going very quickly, that dropped to 37,500. And I helped myself to a good few of those, and
right.
I still have some of those now as brood mares.
Okay, see, and you'd no doubt at that stage that...
Well, you'd always have some doubt, but you'd be hoping that that the one that you would pick, that the percentage would be better than for the average.
So these are the big calls that you must look back at now and go, got that right. That was good.
Oh, I got lucky.
Okay, well that's like, I don't know, because it's, you know, it's all that time and effort and energy put into, and it's the scouting of talking to Mick Kinane and then believing your own value. Isn't that it, really?
Well, I used to know, at least we did a calculation one time of the number of hours it took from the time you mate your mare until the progeny appears on the track. I can't recall how many hours it was, but it was a massive number of hours and a lot of effort by a lot of people. And I've been blessed down the years with very good staff. Some of them now are with me longer than they would care to remember, but it's upwards of 30 years with some of them, you know.
So it's a team effort to get...
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Even from sending the mare to be covered by Galileo to that horse winning races.
Yeah, and in the early days then, any fillies that I was retiring, they went down to Wexford. I had some land down there, but not enough for all of them. And my brother Paddy, he ran the farm and looked after all the foaling. And nowadays his son Ken does all that for me. So
Jim, the bit that you kind of mentioned, while this was all happening, it was while you were building up that side of the business, you were fortunate enough to be having some winners as well. How did you go from being somebody who was a show jumper to training Derby winners? What was that process? Well, as I mentioned earlier on, the basic with horses, the basic training for show jumping and racing is not very different. Get them fit and keep them healthy. You know, build them up, get them strong, get them fit, and then see what they can do, whether you're going to be jumping or galloping on the flat. And obviously then you kind of have to teach them the rudiments of flat racing. And any trainer who has one good enough to win a derby will probably get the job done. But the basic requirement is to have the horse. How do you quantify getting a horse fit? What's your strategy for making sure that you think this horse is now as fit and healthy as we can get it and strong? Well, when you think he's that way, you enter him in a maiden race. Right. And depending on how he does there, then you know his real level of fitness at that stage. And with all the experience that you have now, can you assess from the gallops at home this horse is going to do well in this maiden? We'd have a good idea, but it can be it's very competitive now. Whereas when I started out, the only one, well, you had 3 or 4 to avoid if you felt your horse could win a race. Vincent O'Brien, PJ Prendergast,
Kevin Prendergast, Con Collins, Mick Connolly, and a few others that were. My competitor to this day, Dermot Wild, and if you could avoid them, or if they weren't running one for the first time, if they had given one a run and you could see that maybe it wasn't top class, then you could take them on.
You were happy enough.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the other skill in this is it's great knowing how well your horses are running, but you actually have to know how everybody else is doing at the same time so that you can place them in the right races.
Well, the betting was never a big thing with me, so if I felt that we had a really good 2-year-old, we weren't afraid to try it out.
Okay.
Go to the races and see what happens.
Your own skill as a trainer, did you get better and better as time went on? Or was it actually always just the fundamental philosophy of if this horse is well and fit, then off they go?
Well, I could be obnoxious and say I was always good at it, but that wasn't the case. But I wouldn't think that I improved massively either. The one thing that no trainer knows at any stage with, say, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old first time out, do I have this, is this fella 100%? And is he bomb-proof as far as taking in the occasion and not messing his lines?
Yeah.
You can never be that cocky about that, you know. Lots of times horses let you down first time out, and you have to kind of rectify what they did wrong and go back again.
And that could be anything from the occasion or an upset in the...
Yeah, or maybe a bump at the start or whatever, you know, or maybe even though he's been jumping out of the stalls pretty smartly at home, he could be a little bit tardy at the track.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just stuff you have to...
Yeah, and then you get some horses, they jump out and they want to do too much early on and they're not able to get home.
Yeah.
There was a race yesterday at Goodwood, and I thought that they went a bit strong in the early stages. So I read in the paper this morning that John Gosden was suggesting that he finished second, that maybe the boys went a bit fast, which I don't think there was any doubt about it.
Right.
But he
was his polite, cautious way of saying it.
He was very polite. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Like who's going to tell Frankie Dettori and Ryan Moore that they went too fast, you know?
Yeah. I mean, somebody has to, or do they?
Everybody in racing makes mistakes.
Right.
Down the years, people of my vintage would have noticed that probably Lester Piggott made fewer mistakes than anybody else. And they're the ones that win the most races then.
So that's the greatness, it's about being consistent.
Yeah, it's a bit the same in the hurling and football. You get very consistent players. You know, you could bet your bottom dollar on them every time they go out that they'll give you a performance.
Tim, I think I'm right in talking about the training ground that you have. There's a big hill there, is that right?
Yes, yeah. Rises 150 feet from the bottom to the top.
So the first time that I ever had a conversation with you about this, I've kind of been obsessed about hills in sports since, and you know, I see Sonia Sullivan talking about running up hills. Ronnie Delaney talked about on his way to school every day he'd run up a hill, and it came off the back of when you saw the hill, something clicked in your head and you went, that's what I want.
Yeah, well, who was the great Australian runner around Ryan Delaney's time?
Roger Bannister?
I think it was Bannister, yeah. And he didn't do any slow training at all. He went to the dunes, and I don't know how many feet they rose up, but anyway, and of course you're going deep into the sand as well. And he couldn't wait to get to the point where he was feeling tired and then push himself on from there. But that wouldn't really work with racehorses because, you know, you have to keep their minds fresh as well, and you can only give them what they can take. So
when you saw this piece of land, was Roger Bannister in the back of your head going, this is as close as an approximation as I can get?
No, obviously not, but I knew the minute I saw it that this could work, and the price was right. So
and that's the farm in Carlow, is it?
Well, it's County Kilkenny, but the postal address is Carlow.
Okay, so they both claim
we decided day one when we went there that we weren't going to write down Cool Colin via Carlow, County Kilkenny. So we left out the Kilkenny, but I think everybody knows I'm in County Kilkenny.
Okay.
And for a Wexford man, I'm very happy to be sleeping with the enemy.
Okay. Fair enough. Stay with us, Tim, because we've got loads more to talk to you about. Johnny Ward is with us now on the line from Galway. Johnny, how are you doing?
How are you, Ger? How are things?
Yeah, good. How's your day going today?
Not bad. Racing doesn't start until after 5 o'clock, so got here around 2 o'clock. I think the crowd was slightly down yesterday, despite it being good weather. But the atmosphere is building up here. A little bit overcast, but it's lovely weather really, and everyone's been in great form for the week. And Jim's rival Dermot Weld just waiting for his first winner of the week, which would obviously complete the narrative somewhat.
Yeah, no doubt. You've made your way from Kazakhstan to Galway. So which do you prefer, Johnny?
It was actually Azerbaijan.
Sorry.
A big difference there. They both have the stand in the. No, they don't actually. They don't even both have the stand in it. But Azerbaijan is quite close to that. It's probably the most easternmost part of maybe the European football teams, although Kazakhstan's actually part of the UEFA as well. So it's very interesting. A lot of oil wealth, fair bit of poverty as well, a lot of vanity projects from a sort of a dictatorial regime. And a team that's very, very good, and really hockey Dundalk on Wednesday night. Yeah,
no, for sure. Friday Night Racing, a reminder, of course, brought to you by GoRacing.ie. If you're heading over to Galway at the weekend, or indeed if you're heading to any of the Irish race meetings, make sure you get on to GoRacing.ie to check out the card and all the details about the various racetracks around the country. The Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Charity Fund is at 6329, I think, is the latest figure we have for that one. This week we're looking at a race on Saturday. Is that right, Johnny?
I think my nap's on Sunday.
Sorry, you're right. Yeah, 2:15. Yes.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking. This is trained by Gavin Cromwell, and Gavin's had a really, really good run of things. He actually had 20 winners in the month of July. He's obviously one of our previous guests on the show, and this horse won very easily during the week over an extended trip. He's dropping back to 2 miles and 160 yards on Sunday under Darragh O'Keefe, taking off the 2 pounds in this apprentice race. I think he'll take an awful lot of beating. Okay, so I like the way you're thinking in the 2:15 at Galway on Sunday. What else are you looking forward to over the course of the weekend, Johnny? Yeah, it's a good card on Saturday in Galway. The second nursery of the season. Jim would have some runners as well over the 2 days. It's quite competitive in Galway tomorrow. Willie Mullins has the second race sort of sewn up in recent years, but JP McManus has a lot of runners as well. I think he may have 8 runners in that handicap at 2:30, and one of them is Rock the Bone, trained by the indefatigable John Kiley at the bottom of the weight. Mark Enright takes the ride at him. I do like his chance. That's Rock the Bone in the 2:30. Certainly is a chance. Going on to Sunday then in Galway, it's another fairly competitive fixture, as you'd well imagine. There's a 120 grand handicap, the Hanora handicap, which is going to be an awful lot reliant in terms of look and running. We have a horse here, Saltonstall, who won earlier in the week. He's gone back for more, and it's a very, very tough race. But if he gets the breaks, he has a reasonable chance. Jim has Madam Seamstress down at the bottom of the way. It's Kevin Manning taking the ride in that, so that'll be a nice pot for Jim to target. Yeah, Madam Seamstress got a hope this weekend, Jim?
Bad draw, get the excuse in already. We'd need to get very lucky, but she ran a very good race over 6 at Naas and was coming home very strongly about 2 weeks ago. So she's in good form, but it's a very difficult draw over 7 furlongs. It matters. It seems to matter a lot in Galway. Over 7 it does. Yeah. The mile and 100 yards isn't too bad. It should be fine. You should be able to make up the difference. Yeah. And there's nothing you can do to ameliorate that. There's no. Well, she won't. She doesn't. She's not blessed with early toe. Okay. So she has to work herself into the race, and I think with 16 or 17 runners, it's going to be very difficult. Okay. But we're not conceding yet. Fair enough. Absolutely not. We were chatting off air about Galway. You've already had 1 runner and 1 winner this week. I think 2 runners and 1 winner. That's not a bad strike rate. It's okay, but I think I'll damage that now coming to the weekend. You were champion trainer one year at Galway, so it's obviously a festival you've had success at down the years? Yeah, once or twice I think, but I can't remember. It probably was late 80s or early 90s. But probably more by accident than design.
Right, so Galway wouldn't have been one of those things that you were kind of targeting. You're using it as a stepping stone to later on in the season.
Well, Galway is very important to racing, so I would always have had runners down there, but it was a place that never worked really well for me.
Right, you weren't laying out horses for Galway.
Oh, you need to target Galway, yeah.
Yeah, because so many other people are doing that.
Well, there quite a few are doing it, but there are a few specialists.
Yeah, that's the nice way of putting it.
I never wanted to take Dermot on. I had too much respect for him.
Fair enough. Okay, Johnny, what else? Sorry, I interrupted you in the middle of that. The Saturday stuff.
No, not at all. It's fine. Always good to listen to Jim. I do hope he tells you about. Given that we're talking about Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, I do hope he talks to you about a former African political personality that he did a deal with earlier. Do you remember that, Jim?
Colonel Gaddafi.
Yeah, what was that?
That was a horse called. His name escapes me now, but he was a novice show jumper who put on a couple of good shows, and then his people came looking for him. So that helped in the early days as well, and I think he went on to do quite well for him out there. But he didn't consult me much in the latter years of his life.
You might have been able to save him.
So just somebody knocks on the door and says, "I'm a representative from Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. I'd like to buy your horse."
Well, it was an Irish agent who had the contact. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, no problems."
Actually, they came in and there were 4 or 5 of them, mainly from the army, and I think they bought a half a dozen horses, and I was lucky enough that mine was one of them.
Okay, you never headed up over to Libya to see if there was any more business that could be done?
Well, down the years, sold him a stallion then later on.
Right.
Yeah. He was reasonably good racehorse, and he bought him then as a stallion because he was a good looker, so he knew that he could cover the sport horses with him as well.
Okay, all right. Johnny, what were you going to say there, sorry?
I think when you live a life in racing, Colonel Gaddafi would be relatively benign, I think, in terms of some of the characters you come across anyway.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I mean, anyway.
Well, he was okay at that stage, but I think he kind of went off the tracks after that.
There you go.
And paid the price. But I wouldn't be sure that they've improved things out there since he left.
This is the thing, yeah. The reason I was actually talking initially was to mention the Stewards Cup tomorrow. Sir Maximilian is interested there. He's a 40-1 chance for Ian Williams in a very, very tough race. I don't know if you've had many runners in the gym down the years in the Stewards Cup. I
don't think I've had any. I've had runners in the Morecambe, and we've been lucky and unlucky in the Nassau Stakes. We won that twice, and we were second in it twice. One of them would be a very memorable race. It was Ouija Board and Alexander Gold Run.
That's right.
And it was like the Bustino race at Ascot. They were neck and neck for 2 furlongs, and they got the bob at the line anyway. I think it was a short head.
That's class, though, being involved in something like that. Now, in retrospect, it's great. I mean, I presume when you lose something like that, it's heartbreaking.
Well, it's a race worth looking up at any stage, Alexander Gold Run and Ouija Board.
In Galway?
In Goodwood.
In Goodwood, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you get over those defeats? Are you somebody who lives with them now and goes, okay, that's fair enough, I've won some of those as well?
Well, I don't get too high or too low.
Right.
Johnny would tell you what I do.
Yeah, that actually is true, in fairness, and even I think over the few years that I've known him, it hasn't changed at all, and you probably have a long way to go when you look at kind of Kevin Prendergast and even the aforementioned Kielys. I think Jim will probably be still the very laid-back character for many years to come as well.
Well, I'd be the junior one of those 3.
I'd say you got more energised last Sunday than you would by racing.
Well, racing is good, but All-Ireland semi-finals and Leinster finals are as good as you can find.
I can only imagine what it would have been like down around your place if it had been a Wexford-Kilkenny final as well.
Well, I like sharing, so we've about 125,000, I think, in Wexford now, and I like sharing with them.
Like, that's an interesting point about the not getting too high or too low. It's such an adrenaline sport. It's such a short thing. The 7 furlong races, they're over so quickly. How do you not get high and how do you not get low when you're so invested in them?
Well, somebody asked me one time, how do I get on with Dermot Weld? And I said, no, we'd be pretty silly. You know, we've been at it for 40 years or thereabouts, and if we didn't get along at this stage, it wouldn't say much for us. And it's a little bit the same with the highs and the lows. You know, you enjoy the highs very much, but you can't afford to get too low because you know, you have your family and staff and other owners to consider, and you have to get on with the job. And nobody's going to feel too sorry for somebody who's having plenty of success anyway. So you just have to grin and bear it when it goes wrong.
The other thing is that it's clearly a 365 days a year job. The horses need fed every day. They need to be minded, and you need to be aware of what exactly is happening. So, like, at some point, do you see this slowing down for you, or?
Well, it has slowed down a little bit. I haven't worked Christmas Day now since 1982. So it's 364 at this stage, yeah.
Right. Do you see yourself coming off a little bit of the level of work that you're at the minute, or will you just keep going?
If I'm good at anything, I think I'm a very good delegator.
Right.
And I have staff that I'm very fortunate in having, that I can trust them with my life, and they do things probably even better than I would do them. So yeah, I've stepped back a good bit in recent years.
So now when you think back to the young man that you were, who had the crazy notion of spending his life working with horses, you must be pretty happy with how it's all worked out. And like, it's an amazing body of work that you've put together.
Yeah, well, it's so competitive. You still have to keep the show on the road, so you don't get much time for the nostalgia.
But sitting here now, when I ask you to think about it, like, you know, when you think about that kid, and when you started telling people about your dreams, and they're like, no, that's...
Well, as I said earlier, I didn't tell people very much because they wouldn't have believed me anyway. But my ambition when I started out was, you know, if I can do this and stay in business and maybe win the Meidler Stakes someday, that was definitely the zenith of what I wish to achieve.
Well, you clearly blitzed that. How do you rate success now? Is it purely at the end of the season you look at the number of winners you've had and the prize money that your horses have won, or is it now at the stage of your career about the joy that you can get in seeing an underexposed bloodline in advance of everybody else and go, oh, there you go, we've done it again?
Nowadays, if I think that I can do it for another year, that's what I'm thinking of. So it's lots of jobs are kind of, and situations are day to day, but mine is year to year.
Well, that's fair enough.
Hopefully I get another year or two out of it.
Well, that's fair enough. Johnny, your tip this week is, I like the way you're thinking in the 2:15 at Galway on Sunday. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention before we let you go?
Probably just my favourite gym story. I think it was the first time I was in Coolcullen, and just like now, and I suppose like all my years as a journalist, I was looking for work, always available for work, and I said, Jim, I know there's a very, very good book that hasn't been written, and you know, if you want a ghostwriter, I'm available. And he paused and he said, you're number 13 on the list.
That was a joke, Johnny. You'd be much higher than that.
4th or 5th at least.
I couldn't imagine. I can't imagine why anybody would even contemplate doing it.
You never thought about it?
Some of it would be true as well.
Sorry, Johnny.
Some of it would be true as well.
I'm sure it would if you wrote it, because sure, you're the truth in the news.
Something like that, yeah. I hope I'm at least 12 anyway now at this stage.
I know, as I said, you'd be much higher than that. Lower down the scale, I mean, you'd be high on my agenda.
That's nice to hear. You must have mellowed with age.
Well, that's usually what happens, isn't it? Yeah.
Are you going to write a book? Is now a time?
No, I have no plans. No. I'll scribble a few lines for any of my family that might want it.
Yeah.
And
I think people will be interested. It's a great story.
They might be, but I'd never be presumptuous enough to think that people would want to pay money for my book.
That's why you have writers like Johnny to presume on your behalf. So.
Exactly, yeah.
Jim, it's always great spending some time in your company. Thanks a million, and best of luck with the horses at the weekend. And for the rest of the season, is there any of your charges that you're particularly sweet on at the minute?
We ran a filly first time out at Gorham Park, and her owner doesn't even know this, but she belongs to Ballylynch Stud. And she won a maiden race there for 3-year-olds very nicely. And she got injured then after that, and she's coming back at the moment. And I'm hopeful now that we can keep it all together, and I expect her to do well before the year is out.
Okay, what's her name?
Solage.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. Jim, that's great. Thanks a million. And best of luck. And Johnny, best of luck with the rest of your weekend in Galway. I'm sure the jet lag isn't too bad.
No, not at all. I mean, whatever about Azerbaijan, this place will carry out.
I'll see you at the Corra, Johnny.
Absolutely. It's great to talk to you, Jim.
A reminder, you can enjoy the Tote versus SP Best Price Guarantee and all Irish racing this weekend. See thetote.com for more. Friday Night Racing is brought to you by GoRacing.ie. Make sure you check it out in advance of heading along to any of the race meetings. That is another Friday Night Racing in the books. We'll see you next week if you're watching us on Friday afternoon. And if you're listening to us on the radio, then stay tuned. We've got some great stuff coming your way from 3 of our best up-and-coming boxers who are celebrating a successful European Games in Minsk. That's next.
Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
And they're off.
Brought to you by Go Racing. Plan your day at the races at goracing.ie.